Welcome to the Microbiome Report, powered by Biome Health. I'm your host, Andrea Wien, and today for our mini episode, we have Emily Sodry, certified nurse midwife, on the line to talk to us about estrogen. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So this is really meant to be just a quick overview on why we see so much estrogen dominance and what you see in practice with your patients. So would love to just get a quick overview on what estrogen is, what it does, and what you really see day to day.
Sure. So estrogen is one of the major female hormones that governs all kinds of processes in the body. We know a lot about it in terms of the menstrual cycle. That's sort of what the general layperson knows about it in relation to, as well as pregnancy. It is a hormone that is produced primarily by the ovaries under influence from the anterior pituitary gland in the brain. Like all hormones in the body, it works on a feedback loop. So ideally, if it is working well and in concert with your pituitary, your ovaries will know not to produce too much. It also can be produced by fat cells, which comes into play for so many of my clients who are struggling with unwanted activity on their body. So we work on that a lot in terms of what are all the different ways that estrogen is being produced in the body. It is a sex hormone, so it does govern part of the menstrual cycle. It also just contributes to lots of other sort of feelings in the body. Excess estrogen contributes to breast tenderness and mood and, sex drive and all kinds of things. So when it's in good balance, it's a lovely hormone. It's a hormone of passion and a hormone of connection. But when it's in excess, it can produce all kinds of unwanted feelings and side effects.
So why do we see an excess of estrogen, and what role does the microbiome really play in keeping estrogen in check?
Yeah, such a good question. So there are so many reasons why we see estrogen dominance, which just means that there is too much circulating estrogen in the body. So we can see that in sometimes serum, like a blood test. You can see elevated levels above what the normal sort of median levels would be in the general population. You can also see it in hormone metabolites in what our body's excreting in urine and saliva. We ideally should be able to handle a little bit of maybe extra exposure to estrogen in the environment. You can be exposed to estrogen via parabens, things in your beauty products. Those are pro-estrogenic. You can also be exposed to pro-estrogenic or sort of pseudo-estrogens, things that act like estrogen in the body, in plastics and all kinds of products that we use that are in packaging, like even food wrapped in plastic wrap, even using plastic dishware. These are especially released if your dishware or what's containing your food is heated. Releases that a lot stronger. So BPA being one of the major drivers of that, which is a major component of plastic, as you know.
What about in food? So I think people sometimes think that tofu or soy, which can be a form of phytoestrogen, is bad. Is that the case, or is that being misunderstood for things that are more of like the plastic estrogens that you're talking about?
Yeah, so it that certainly gets talked about, and there have been some case studies of, say, like young children or men who are eating a diet very, very high in soy. And I really only see it come into play in clinical practice where we remove something and see a benefit when we're talking about like very processed soy, and in particular like GMO soy, so genetically modified soy. But traditionally, like the sort of phytoestrogen or pseudoestrogen that you see activity from tofu or other kinds of soy products is not problematic and can actually be beneficial. So then those things we recommend to women who are postmenopausal actually for supporting endogenous estrogen activity in the body. And then back to your other question about the microbiome, really the role of the gut by way of the liver as well is to help us get rid of anything that is imbalanced in the body. So whether that's toxins or excess hormones. And so estrogen is the really big one here because the major ways to improve estrogen and hormonal balance in the body is really just to have a healthy excretory system. So having regular bowel movements, and not just having daily bowel movements, but having bowel movements that are complete. So a diet that's not rich in fiber may not really be capturing all that the liver is kind of dumping into the bowels to get out of the body. If we're not getting that out of the body, then that can be reabsorbed, especially if you don't have good integrity in the gut lining.
What is the role of beta glucuronidase in this whole process? So that's an enzyme that kind of helps to keep these estrogen levels in check. But do we know how that functions with the gut bacteria?
Right. So when there's an imbalance in gut bacteria, some of the gut bacteria that we don't want around, or if they're growing in excess, can produce excess levels of an enzyme called beta glucuronidase. Very nice that you brought that up. And that enzyme basically unpackages wrapped up estrogen that the liver has said, okay, like we have enough of this. We're going to sort of package this up, tie a neat little bow on it, and send it to the stool. And it's just going to, end up going all the way down that highway and out of the body. Well, what happens is if you have too much beta glucuronidase, it's basically unwrapping that package and releasing this estrogen that the liver knew we didn't need. So it's the body really against itself. And so the way to really deal with that from a very upstream approach is to balance your microbiome health and balance that bacteria. But in a short term, a lot of times what I'll do is if I'm working with someone who's got a lot of estrogen dominance while we're cleaning up the gut, in order to alleviate some of those hormonal symptoms due to excess estrogen, we will give a supplement called calcium D-glucarate, which doesn't get rid of beta glucuronidase, it just blocks the action. So it will do that for 3 or 6 months. And in the meantime, hope to clean up the diet, add back more fiber, maybe add some other support to help with estrogen detox. It's always kind of working in multiple areas to hopefully get the result that you want and take away things as the body's mechanisms, come back and are more self-sufficient, basically.
And I think too, people who are listening to this and think, how big of a deal can it really be? I just maybe use Tupperware or some different plastics, or even receipt paper, has a lot of BPA on it. Mm-hmm. So elevated beta glucuronidase, try to say that 3 times fast. Those levels are associated with everything from PMS, obesity, cancer, endometriosis, infertility, mood, heart disease. So the list really goes on and on. It's not a small problem, right?
No, it's not. And, a lot of times people will come to me and they don't even think that it's an estrogen, that estrogen is the driver of what's going on for them. And, in an allopathic model in general medicine, we know that things like getting your period earlier and going into menopause later and having heavier periods and not breastfeeding are all risk factors for estrogen-driven cancers. And the reason for that is because the longer that you are cycling, the more estrogen your ovaries are producing over the course of your lifespan. And the less that you're breastfeeding, the less you're basically turning that system off and pausing ovarian output of estrogen. So we know that there's this large correlation between cancer growth and excess estrogen. And the way that we deal with it in an allopathic model is, encouraging people to breastfeed would be one, but the major thing is, for people who have very heavy, long cycles where we, on a functional space, know that that is driven by imbalance in hormones, we sort of suppress that by giving, birth control methods that especially have progesterone to really block and suppress that action of estrogen. But truly, if we look back, there have to be other things going on that we should be dealing with besides just, treating them with exogenous hormones. And now I can't even remember what your question was because I got on a little soapbox about, just this idea that it's part, we really do understand that estrogen is damaging. But we are not dealing with it from a multi-system, multifactorial approach in the general population. And that general approach would be so much more than just blocking that action with a pharmaceutical, but really looking at the whole body and saying, why is there not good excretion? And what are these exposures that are driving this? Like you said, I mean, it's so many things in our daily life. Even our water has plastic particles. Even the fish that we eat has plastic particles because our oceans are so polluted with plastic. So even if you have a really clean, you think you have a really clean lifestyle, you're doing all of the things, you may still need some extra support around detoxing sort of extra plastic and estrogen exposures just by means of like being a human on this planet. So then you take the average person who is using Tupperware, and then maybe they work in some kind of sales position where they're touching receipts all day, and then they're drinking water out of a plastic water bottle like that. And it by itself, you throw in a little bit of like baseline stress, which 99% of people in my practice have. And then, then you've thrown the whole thing way out of balance. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're already starting from a place where the body is working extra hard just to deal with the planet the way that it is, you throw those extra things in and you've got a really systemic problem.
Yeah, we did an episode with Josh Katalis where he talked about obesogens, which ties into this whole discussion, people who are drinking out of plastic water bottles, why they can't lose weight. And it really ties into this whole estrogen conversation. There's also a new term that I've heard, the estrobolome. Estrobolome. Yeah. So that's really the collection of bacteria in the gut that is helping to metabolize and modulate what our body is circulating in terms of estrogen. So if anyone wants to learn more, this is just our little mini episode. We'll be doing more on estrogen, the microbiome, metabolic syndrome, menopausal women, all of those topics in the next couple of months. So stay tuned. But if you want to check out the show notes for this episode, kind of see some of the spelling of a few of these things, I'll put some different graphics and things up there. You can go to biomehealth.com/pages/podcast. Emily, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.